And at the end, if we are a rector or vice rector, really the time devoted to this new assignment, this new profession, let us say, I'm not completely agree with that it's a new profession, but this a new part of our position is, as I said, bigger and bigger. And that means that we should be very aware of which are the differences between this yellow hat and the green position as an academics. We would like to share with you two main differences in two different areas. The first is to characterize, to explain you a little bit the difference of the traits, of the characteristics of a managerial activity, the managerial work. How is it? Because it's substantially different of an academic activity. And the other is, what's the content of this managerial activity? What's the content of this yellow hat that we have when we start to be managers or executives in our institutions? So at the end of the day, is asking, what do managers do? Because this will we will help with these 2 points to clarify a little bit more what are the differences of nature between our academic position and our yellow hat or managerial position. Let us start just with the first point, with the differences of characteristics of this kind of activity. If we could film any of you as an academic manager, what would we observe in the screen now? What I'm going to do now is to share with you a lot of data of different researchers that have been doing this, recording, observing, and managers performing his or her function. So, but what I would like to ask you is not only to see the data related with the managerial work, but while I'm doing it, please keep in mind the following question: how does these characteristics, this data, this affect me? How does all this affect me? Let us start in with the most elemental data: how many hours we spend as managers. As most of the studies are telling us that in a managerial position, we start to have higher number of working hours. You have here a set of research, and more or less the average is about 50 hours every week. This is not very important because as academics, sometimes we spend 60 hours or even more. No? The point is that this kind of nature, the working activity, perhaps the most relevant characteristic is that managing take as much time as possible, as when we were want to be an expert in a domain, because it is nature. The nature of this position is open-ended. That means that you will never have the feeling that there are no more things to do or more problems to solve. There is always something else that you could or you should do. This happens also when you study something, but most of our time we start a class at a specific time and we finish it. And once we have finished, the class is finished. If we have a meeting with the students. The same, if we start a project, a research project, we have a starting point and a finishing point. In management, you never have this final point, because you have this nature of open-ended activity that you always can improve. You always can do something more. Is if you want to look for a analogy, is more related with of trying to be an expert in an academic field that you always can spend all your life studying, researching, than the activity we perform as professors, teaching, researching, or giving speeches in a seminar, in a congress, in in any other situation. So the point here is you are starting to work in a activity that, as essentially, you don't have an ending point. You will never have the feeling everything has been done. You always have this feeling of something more could be done, something more could be improved, something more can always. Related with these long hours of non-ended activity are full of a lot of activities, small activities, that creates a high work rhythm. The pattern of activities is very intensive. Here you have one of the researchers I choose is of a US professor, that he found one activity every minute. Evidently, it's not our case, even if we are deans or if we are vice rectors. But the message is very intensive, extremely intensive. There is another way to see this characteristic, this trait of a managerial activity. That is, how much time do we have to reflect in the traditional sense. Here you have one of the figures I like to show. Is a study done by Rosemary Stewart in United Kingdom. In her sample, the executives only got 30 minutes with no interruptions every 2 days. So it's a kind of activity that, for its own nature, not because you are performing bad, the own nature of this activity means that you will have a lot of interruptions. And reading the same fact from the other side, you won't have the traditional time to think, to reflect, to go deeper. And this characteristic for a good professor, it creates some kind of tension, some kind of an easy feeling, no? The result of this is that managing is a job of high work rhythm, one activity after another, and you have to add another thing, that is with a perpetual preoccupation. What would happen if this provider don't help us with the books that we need? What happens if the secretary of the university is not doing that? You always have this feeling of that something can go wrong. You have always this perpetual preoccupation. Other threat. These activities are not long activities, and you have 2 days for reading and writing, or 1 day with all your classes, whatever. These are these long hours are filled by brief and varied activities. You have here 3 other research that shows you that the average of the time, the average time of an activity is fewer than 9 minutes. But this kind of research sometimes forget that this is an average. This is not a good statistical measure. If you disconsider all the meetings that sometimes you spend in a meeting 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, if you put apart all these activities, the average of the activities fall down immediately. The activities consume less than 3 to 1 minute. So we are prepared for having a speech during 1 hour, having a research for 2-3 days in a row, trying to go deeper in an issue, to reviewing a document. We have sometimes our pieces of activity in our academic life are of half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours. In the managerial position, the activity tend to last less than 2 minutes. And if you analyze even in a more detail, and you consider each WhatsApp, each email, each phone call, an activity, even the average of time is even lower. Okay. But the point is that they are not only brave and varied, but they are all highly, as I suggest you before, fragmented and discontinuous. You are doing something and you are focusing your attention in reading a document or writing an email, and someone phone you or someone tell you, please come to my office because we have this problem, or something enter in your office to ask for something. So it's very highly fragmented and discontinuous, and you move from an activity to another. These very small activities are constantly dancing in front of you, and you are dancing with them. Look at this figure. Meetings and contacts that we have in one day. 13 out of 14 meetings and contacts were unplanned, were ad hoc activities. A very similar research that I mentioned before with of Rosemary Stewart, the Carlson research. He studied that Swedish managers, executives, and he observed that they could barely get 23 minutes without interruption once every third day. That means that you cannot have this time that we are looking always as academics to have at least one hour, half an hour, 2 hours to devote to something. No. You constantly are interrupted with another activities. This has a very, very strong implications in the way we work. And implications that are directly related with our spirituality or the way we try to keep our internal life. Why? Because we are moving from an academic activity that try to give you a specialization, go deeper in some issues, being an expert in this specific field. You move from this to an activity that is dispersion and variety. Constantly, dispersion and variety. Problems between people, problems in the schedules, opportunities for new activities, knowing more people in plenty of new petitions, whatever. No. So the point is that this also obliges you to something that we could consider a fraud, not to be a very a fair person, because you have to manage. The manager must be prepared to shift moods quickly and frequently. We should have now this good relation between all of us, but someone phone you with a crisis, and then you have to react or even to be tense. Sometimes you have to be very welcoming to understand the vulnerability of the people that you have in front of you. Another time means after 15 minutes you have to be very demanding in a specific situation, and after 1 hour, what you should be is motivating, encouraging people, whatever, and then moving again to solve a conflict where you are involved and is uneasy for you to be there. So this is also for me it's very relevant because it's a very demanding position. This white yellow hat is asking you to be prepared to shift from a mood quickly and frequently to another mood. And that means also something that goes against something that Pope Francis is telling us, not to be superficial. Our activity as managers is because of its nature, not because we want or because we are performing bad, because of its own nature is superficial. Because you have one issue, one activity, then another, and it's very difficult for you to go deeper in each of these activities. It's very difficult to go deeper. So you have to develop a very, very difficult skill, a very difficult competency, that is to try to separate, to see what are those things that are anecdotes, of those things that are symptoms of something important. And if there are symptoms of something important, you have to go deeper. You cannot live in this superficiality. But to be aware of this requires, let me advance some of my personal and rooted convictions. You require to have discernment, not as a process, but as a part of your skin. To have this sensitivity so developed that when you see something, you immediately say, "Whoa, this is very important." Here, there are a lot of people concerned. They are people very vulnerable in this situation. We have to keep calm and to see what we are going. Or sometimes you say, "Well, this is something irrelevant. Let us go ahead. Tell them this or that, but go ahead." No, this sensitivity, this having in your skin this capacity to understand when something requires to go deeper and when you can go ahead and solve the questions in 30 seconds, it's very, very difficult and very relevant. Another trait or another characteristic of the executive work is this strong orientation towards action. Our activity is clearly oriented towards those kind of activities that cause change, that are tangible, that are not routines. In consequence, sometimes we prefer fresh information, even if it is only a rumor, over formalized and checked information. We live in a world that is a world of stimulus response in very short period of time, action and reaction environment. No, there is a study of a very good professor. It's an old study, but the new studies are just confirming the data that 2/3 of our activity that we dedicate time, efforts, energies are initiated by others. That means that we are not so proactive as we would thought. No, we really are in some sense reactive, because a big part, 2/3 of our job is reactive. It doesn't mean that this is enough. No. Probably this third of be proactive is crucial, essential, but we have to keep in mind that the nature of our activity is in two-thirds reactive activities. Other very important threat of our managerial job is that our jobs are very intensive in personal relationships. If you analyze these two tables, and even I will give you a data later for a more recent study, if you disconsider the work office, that is around 20-25% of our time, the rest of the time, the average is that the 80% of our time is interpersonal relations. It doesn't matter if it's by telephone calls, by the scheduled meetings, but by casual contacts or by observation tours or any other mean. The point is that our managerial work is extremely intense, extremely with a very high level of interpersonal relations. So this is why emotional leadership became 10, 15 years ago extremely relevant, because emotions are directly related with this 80% of our time. Here you have another. I decided to show you this slide because it's a study done by Michael Porter, and Michael Porter is a big guru, the most quoted academic in management. Although I have to say, believe me that I am humble in this field, that he's a very bad researcher in this specific field, but he's so well known that I decided to offer you this slide. In his sample, he saw that time with others was around 72% of their time, and alone time was only 28. As a consequence of these traits, is another natural consequence, is that informal and oral communication are extremely important. If we have these interpersonal relations, if we have this kind of activities, informal and oral communication is very relevant. In fact, managers spend between 60 and 90% of his or her time on oral communication. He or she mostly use informal information, as I said a little bit earlier. So verbal, visual, and I would add visceral communication from the guts, from the how you pronounce it, guts from the las tripas, are extremely important. Extremely important. Like the communication coming from our deep inside is extremely important. And also something that we should keep in mind, that is not essentially a hierarchical position, or these kind of relations are not mainly hierarchical. In fact, only half, if you analyze the percentage of the screen, only more or less half of the time devoted to interpersonal relations with superiors, 7%, or with subordinates, 48%, more or less half the time are hierarchical, but the rest are lateral. Colleagues, students, other experts in the field, officials of the university. These are, so it means that it's a very mixed kind of relations, lateral and hierarchical. And also this slide also show you that the manager tends to become the center of an information flow. One of the most important things to develop, we will see later in the second point, is to be able to manage information. You are in the center of a crossroad of hundreds of information relationships. Okay, can you control this job or not? is the observation we had is really a mix. I choose here two very different analogies. We have a lot of experts that consider that the best analogy of a managerial position is that you are a conductor. And through your effort, vision, and leadership, individual instrumental parts uh, pass to be just noises by themselves to become a living whole of music. This is one analogy. You are a conductor. But the other analogy that is also uh, deeply rooted in the reality is that we are puppets, meaning that it is a Sune Carlson quote that he felt inclined to see the managers as the puppet in the puppet show with hundreds of people pulling strings and forcing him to act in one way or another. And probably the truth is that both are can describe better together the reality. This means that we have to be aware that we can create, as we said before, we can be proactive, we can create our own activities, but we have to take advantage of the activities that are imposed by others, because 2/3 of our time we will be pulled as puppets to do something or another thing. And we have to take advantage of these situations to try to bring those things that we consider important for the institution. This is a very important question. The impact of new technologies on the executive work traits. Does it change a lot or not? And new technologies, what we know coming from the present studies is that the new technologies exacerbate or strongly increase these previous traits, these characteristics that we have been considering before. There are some nuances or some different, perhaps some small changes. One is that we have more connection, more communication, and more external, because what happens is that we have more wider net of relations, but we deal with this network in a more superficial level. And at the same time, we increase the extension of manager external networks at the expenses of internal communication. And the only exception that seems that are clear at this point is that there are lower time devoted to oral communication, and to face-to-face communication is reducing a little bit. Okay, let me, perhaps some of you will be thinking, do all these traits suggest bad managing? And this is a summary of a very good professor that I already quoted, Henry Mintzberg. He said, not at all, not at all. All these traits suggest normal managing, inevitable managing. This is very important for us. Inevitable managing is what I'm trying to show you with all these figures. These figures we have figures from the 40s of the last century until today, and they are repeatedly telling us the same. And from the private sector, non-lucrative sector, private and public sector, so we have observations in all these sectors. These are normal managing, inevitable managing. However, these characteristics are normal within limits. Exceed these limits, go beyond these limits, and the practice of management can become really dysfunctional and can cause a lot of damage in the institution, around your colleagues, your subordinates, your normal environment, and even to you, normal, even to you, and even to your spiritual life. New technologies can cause this, but so can the characteristics themselves. So let me summarize. Mm, what what's the characteristics of this hat of managing, that some things are relatively similar to academic activities, but others are quite different. The characteristics are long working hours with a high rhythm, activities that are brief and varied, fragmented and discontinuous, clearly uh, oriented to action, very intensive 80% of the time, in the average. There are some positions that are even more intensive in interpersonal relations, with lateral and hierarchical relations at the same time. That creates uh, an environment where you can control, sometimes covered and sometimes uncovered. Sometimes you are a conductor of an orchestra, or sometimes you are a puppet. And all this is enhanced by new technologies. Let me, now that we have been talking almost for 45 minutes, uh, have a small break, but in order to reflect and to think about on our own reality. Take into account all these traits. In your opinion, which would be the consequences for your profession, your activity, and the consequence in your professional life of this time of job? Give us 2-3 minutes and try to think about these potential consequences and write one or two recommendations to avoid negative impacts. Okay? Let us have some silence between us.
Thank you, Carlos. Carlos, should we write something on the chat in order to answer the questions?
I would suggest if you all are willing to share some of your comments, perfect. If not, we can share through our chat, or even we can do it at the end of the session. But if any of you would like to share with us some of your first reaction of all these figures and data, it would be great. Just raise your hand and start to talk.
Already, I think Nuria has put something on the chat, but those of us speaking aloud, please say your name and your institution before, because we didn't have the time to go around at the beginning, so Carlos has an idea of who is talking.
And so if Carlos can stop sharing.
Sure.
Now for the debate.
Sorry. We can make some comment if you prefer to just to keep it in
you have already
Elena, no? Elena
okay, sorry, Elena.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Well, most of you know me already. I'm Elena. I come from the Kirche Network and also from Universidad Loyola. And I was thinking about 2 recommendations to avoid this negative impact that you mentioned, Carlos, that could be this overwhelm with a lot of activities and constant interactions, and also this unsatisfaction of not having an ending point, because it's a constant work and you don't see the finish of it. So I would recommend to try to, even if it's difficult, to block some time on the calendar, so you can have a non-interruption time every day. So everybody on your team knows that you have this half an hour even every morning, that you don't answer to calls, and you are not open for interruptions unless it's very, very urgent. And also to deal with this unsatisfaction of not seeing the final point, I would suggest to celebrate the small successes, and just to try and concrete different activities. So when you've even if it's not your responsibility, but you are following the development of those activities, to celebrate when you end some of the processes that you are in charge of. So that is what I would recommend.
Let me add just the very few comments. I do agree with your suggestions, but let me underline what is behind of one of them. That is that managing the agenda becomes crucial. Managing the agenda is not something that can be done through a very automatized system, but the most scarce resource that you have is your attention and your time. So saying, well, I will protect this half an hour to think about those things, whatever, is crucial. Considering that you shouldn't stop the flow of the work, because if you say, well, I am so rigid that today I won't talk with anybody because the flow of the activity can be suffer a lot. And cutting this flow, you are making other people suffering. So this idea of be flexible, but at the same time, to find ways where you can reflect, you can stop and see what's going on, to have an environment where you can be more honestly yourself, whatever, is crucial. So managing agenda is very relevant. And celebrating a small success is another one. Although there are some kind of psychological profiles that are not willing to do it, but my suggestion would be really, if you can do it because that you will never say this is the final goal, the final end of our work. So having this time of celebration is very, very important. Thank you very much, Elena. Willie.
Yeah, Willie from Innsbruck University. So I'm dean at the moment, and I could understand very well what you taught us about management. So my ideas are two. The first one is more about a habit. I think it's quite important to recognize that less depends on me that I'm tempted to imagine. So of course I have to do some things, but maybe it's not that important than I sometimes think. And the other one is more practical. What I try to do at least is to take more time for decisions and not to answer immediately, but to say, okay, I will think about, and tomorrow you will get my decision or something, if it's possible. I think that avoids a lot of trouble.
Willie, you are in line of one of the most important thinkers in management. Badaracco is a Harvard professor. One of the considerations that he gave to all of us is gain time. How to say, give you more time. So manage expectation of others to have more time to think the issues that are relevant for a longer period of time. He considered that I don't remember exactly the expression in English is managing expectations to have more room of maneuver, more time to think and to go a little bit deeper. He considered that it's a skill, an ability, a competence that is really important to be a good manager, to be able to manage expectations, to have time enough to go a little bit deeper when it is needed. And the other is very, very important. I like very much. I had the same feeling when I started to start managing in a higher education, that the success or the failure of my work clearly does not depend on me, but on a lot of other people that I have to convince, to encourage, people that were from my team, but others that were far beyond of my team. That I had to convince. This is something that is very relevant. Is what in terms of roles that we will see in a moment, we call it the linking role of managing, trying to link, to convince others that are not depending on you. I see a chat here.
Yes, there's a couple of comments.
Could you read it, Gonzalo?
Yes, I will start by Alessandra's. To help mitigate burnout, frustration, conflict, internal and with others, at work and at home, a strong prioritization. Make time for family, friends, and also me time. Ensure regular physical activity, regularly check in with your supervision colleagues about expectations, concern, and be honest when feeling overwhelmed.
I couldn't be more in the same line. In fact, when you are in these kind of positions, you start to have to live in an environment that the Latin people would say is an environment of do ut des. So an environment where I give you something, but I expect something from you. So it's always okay, I'll give you this, but you have to give me this, etc. So you create a kind of relations that are very, very functional, goal-oriented relations, trading constantly, information, favors, whatever, and disappear gratuity. All the enormous importance of that we live as a gift, something that is we don't deserve, but we receive it, and we gave things to others, not expecting anything. This world that is crucial for us, that we live from a gift, disappear because we are so concentrated in this kind of do-des that if you don't find these very high human quality relations, you could suffer a lot in your personal life, in your spiritual life, even in your spiritual life. So, Gonzalo, please.
Yes, there is another comment from Nuria that we introduced at the very beginning. She says, I think a good manager should build around a good team, so making it possible to work collaboratively and strengthen interpersonal relations within the team.
For sure, is the talking about gifts. If you have a good team, is the most important gift you could have. But anyway, there are things that you cannot delegate. You have to manage on your own by yourself, no? And in this, a team is always an asset. Is something, and for me, is one of the most beautiful thing of managing, having this relation of trust or helping each other, whatever. But at the same time, this other part will remain. So please go ahead for the best team you can. That is not always possible because some are positions that you cannot remove people. But really, if you can do it, it is a real gift. Mm-hmm.
I have a question myself, Carlos. It would be so. First, some of us are working in administration. So, for those in administration, this would be like the normal trend or the normal path or the best development. So, no problem in that side. But for those that are academicians, is it really compatible to manage and to work in academics, or because I think our institutions tend to demand a lot from us in terms of management. By doing that, are they destroying our academic potential?
I have to say that I am not very optimistic in the answering your question. In fact, if you analyze deeply, we did it 12 years ago. The traits and characteristics of a good researcher are in the opposite position of a good manager. And even then, the competencies, skills, whatever, no, are so different activities that as a researcher, you have to go very deep, very, very cautious with all the what you say, the word you are using, what you can state from some data or not. You spend a lot of time alone thinking, also in groups, but in management is another world. It's completely different. So it's very, very difficult to articulate both activities. So let us say it's not impossible, but you should enter in this path with this kind of signs in the roads, that is take care, danger, animals around or whatever, or curves in front of you. But at the same time, I have to say that from some of us, probably is the right combination, because you spend, let us say, 9 hours managing, and then if you have 1 hour, 2 hours of researching, is something that cures, how you would say, heals you and give you another world where you can be more recuperate your vocation what you are, what you like to do, whatever. So it's very difficult to articulate, but I have seen through all my life that there are people that can do it perfectly. Be a good manager and be a good researcher, and then a good professor too.
Thank
Okay, so Will, please.
Sorry, in the line with the question of Gonzalo, I neither know if I'm a good manager or a good academic, but what worries me a little bit is that I have the feeling to unlearn a little bit this digging deeper. So when I work 7 hours for managing and then have 1 hour for research, it's really difficult to use that time and to be calm and sit down and be focused on what you're doing. So that's challenging, really challenging.
Yeah, but you say, Willie, is even studied because you have during the first 7 hours, you have so many inputs, so many that it creates. I don't remember exactly the name of the chemical activity of your brain, but it creates constantly inputs and create dopamine constantly, dopamine constantly. And when you start to stop and do nothing but just reading, your brain cannot stop as you would like to stop. Your brain is still is asking for more inputs, for more dopamine, for more. So it's not an easy way to go from managing to researching, but some people are able to do it perfectly, no? But I would agree, Willie, it happened the same to me. Pep.
So yes, maybe building on what Willie was saying, this variety of activities requires a different positioning in front of the people, depending on the person you have in front. In certain moments, you need to defend yourself or attack from someone who's aggressing you. And in other moments, maybe after 5 minutes, you gather with someone else with whom you need to create something. And for this, you need to stop defending you or attacking, but kind of sharing, renewing the trust, etc. And this kind of variety of positions is super difficult. Sorry, guys, you know me, but my suggesting is about meditation and feeling the toes, etc., because this is what allows you not to do anything, to stop the dopamine and start anew and focus on the present situation, not with the habits of the previous activity that you have just done. So focus on the present at every moment, etc. And the transitions between one and the other, you need to do something so that the old habits do not pollute the present attention and the present definition of the situation and the present design of the different different activities that a new situation requires. No? So this kind of maybe short moment of meditation or whatever. Then regarding this idea of open-ended, so when there's a problem that is not solved and you go home and you keep the problem with you and it doesn't help you sleep in the night, etc. So it's also, I think it's important to have developed kind of other activities that are not intellectual. For instance, manual work at home in terms of cooking, in terms of washing, in terms of ironing, in terms of cleaning, or going out for a walk or whatever, that is different and that allows you to take out the hat of the manager, leave it, and then do something else. And then, so hopefully in the night sleep well, even if there's a problem that is still there and that has not been solved. So more or less.
Yeah. Just to underline what Pep was telling us, to make this kind of reflection of what we should do after these 7 hours, 8 hours, 9 hours of managing is not something secondary or in top of what we are doing, or a subsidiary way of thinking. Is nuclear. If you don't solve the way you can compensate, balance this kind of work, you will finish managing bad, being very bad academic, and so on. So the reflections that Pep was telling us, each of us will have its own way, but it's crucial to think how I'm going to tackle all these characteristics, all these patterns that are created for managing. But at the same time, I would try your attention on the idea that is behind of our intervention is, well, my vocation is being academic, but I have to manage because my institution asked me to do it. No, managing is serving the mission as important as researching or teaching. So managing is essential part of our mission. It's not something added. To have good managers in a Jesuit institution is to make the mission be more real in our world. So it's not something that, well, I start to count down the days until I will finish as a dean. I have still 1 year and a half, but now I only have 1 month, and then I will be free of this burden. No. Managing is as important as other different things to serve the mission. So I would like to give the idea that managing is a central part of our service in the higher education mission. Let me go ahead, because at least I would like to give you some ideas of what's beyond the second question. Do you see now?
No, it's coming. It's coming.
Okay, perfect.
No, perfect.
Okay, the second question was, what do managers do? When we analyze our academic life, we understand perfectly well. We research, that means we have to know how to obtain relevant data, to make observation, whatever, to analyze the reality that we have in front of us. We have to, there are some kind of activities or teaching. We prepare classes, we deliver the program, whatever. We have more or less in our head what's the content of being an academic. But it's more difficult to understand what's the content of this yellow hat, this managerial activity. What do managers really do? And the answer is not easy. If you analyze the traditional writers, the gurus of the last century, Henry Fayol perhaps is the first, but Luther Gulick is also very well known. If you read their books, I had to read it because my PhD was related with this issue. Managers, you end up with the idea that managers are rational planners and analytical decision makers. They plan, they organize, they control, they staff and manage all the staff issues. And through all this, they generate the organizational action and the results and impact. But what we have is just a part of what's managing. In fact, this line of thought is very present in our days. The already mentioned Michael Porter, Bob Grant, or Rosabeth Moskanter would tell us that managers are in fact strategists, are strategy designers. And in this way, they generate action, impact, results. But if you read other people, well, you would have another idea. Some gurus of management, mainly what they call it experts on leadership, like John Kotter, Abraham Selesny, Warren Bennis, Scott DeBries, Edmondson, or Linda Hill. The idea you get from reading their books is that managers are leaders. Forget it, strategy, forget control, forget planning. Managers are leaders. And acting through people, they create action and obtain results. But if you read other people, some of them that are bestseller writers, like Tom Peterson and Robert Waterman, your idea at the end of the day would be managers are doers, are action-oriented individuals, and they generate results through their own action. Let us forget strategy, let us forget leadership, is the action, negotiating, solving conflicts, involving directly in those activities. They really create orientation and action. This is why we always like, and we offer you a more holistic view developed by Henry Mintzberg, that he tried to see, tried to analyze, tried to record what managers really do. And what he saw doing his research is that most of the managers, they saw trying to solve problems and crises. And this was a demand. This was what other part of the organization was asking him. Please solve crises, solve problems. He saw also that try to make things better. This kind of very generic demand. Or get resources and assign them through budget, through a meeting where you say, well, Willie, you will do this, Elena, you will do that, Pep, you will do this, etc. Assigning resources, all kind of resources. Also negotiating in order to obtain results. No? These were a kind of activities, part of the content of managing that was related with, in a way or another, making decisions. But he saw at the same time that he spent a lot of time not making decisions, but just having relations with others. And not just for taking decision, for having decisions, for making decisions. For example, there were a lot of activities representing the unity, mainly if you were in the top, the rector, for example, the vice rector, the dean. He saw also that the organization asked them to be well connected and has good networks in order to help the organization to fulfill their goals. Also, there was an implicit demand on the managers that it was to orient and to motivate their own team. This was related, as you see, with people, directly related with people. The first was related with decisions, the second related with people, but he saw also that they spend a lot of time managing information, just information, trying to know what's going on, what's happening. And they spend a lot of time on this. He saw in some of the samples that he he used 70% of the time looking for relevant information in a very problematic organization. Also, he saw this demand of please keep us informed, that its own organization was asking the manager to inform them, to inform the team, to inform the collaborators, because they need information. They were the nucleus, the core of the crossroad of information, and he capitalized a lot of information. And there was a clear demand of, please keep us informed of the relevant information we need. The other was an external demand. Please tell us what you are doing, what you are going to do, what are the problems, trying to inform outside of the unit to the rest of the organization. And finally, he saw also that sometimes they spend time trying to know how to use managerial system or redesign managerial systems. So he said, looking at this, I can understand part of the content. So if they are asked if this is a passive part of the activity, that this is what the organization is asking them, he immediately tried to find out what were the set of actions that they developed to respond to these demands. And he saw that they bring or offer to the organization several roles. The role of disturbance handler or a crisis handler. This idea related with make things better, that is to make the role of entrepreneur, or trying to do the things to make the things better. The role of resource allocator, the role of negotiator, the role of figurehead, the role of a liaison or linking a role, the role of leader, a very relevant one, the role of monitor, trying to understand what's going on around the organization, what was relevant, what was the relevant information. Also, the role of disseminator, the disseminating information through his own team. The role of disseminating information outside of the organization. He chose this, for me, very bad name of a spokesperson role. And finally, the role of controlling or system managers, that was also very relevant, especially when the organizations are very, very big. No? What we have here in his model is the first part, in fact, is you can see the managers trying to act directly by themselves, by myself. The second line of roles is managing through other people, to trying to obtain results through other people. This is a classical way to define managing, obtain results through other people. No? The third is managing information, or managing through information, and obtain results managing information. And the last is managing through systems. But these are just roles to create action. In fact, he said, take care, because all of this is done to obtain specific objectives that are serving a purpose. So if you forget this teleological dimension of managing, you will get lost. You should keep always this idea of purpose in your activity. And also, you have to develop all the specific knowledge. If you are dean, if you are a head of department, if you are an IP, etc., you require a specific knowledge to develop correctly your role. And this is all done in a specific context that, in our case, is higher education and related with the Jesuit society, the Jesuit universities, the Society of Jesus. Let me just I will skip this second moment of reflection because we are just finishing. Because I would like to make two final remarks and then just to spend 5 minutes in open the floor to all of you, just in case you want to add something. This is something that you are going to tackle with David McCallum next Monday, but it's relevant to link both speeches, both webinars. When the context of doing what we saw here is a Jesuit institution, probably you have to take into account at least two questions that are crucial. If purpose is almost everything, because it's what you are trying to do is just to help the purpose of the institution, the purpose of your university, your department, your faculty, whatever. If purpose, that means orientation, is crucial, in our tradition as Jesuit institutions, orientation is deeply rooted and deeply linked with purpose and mission. And to try to understand how this is updated and how this is a reality in the present moment, discernment in common is crucial. You know perfectly more than me, for sure, that discernment is crucial in the Ignatian spirituality. For managing, discernment is crucial also. It's extremely relevant. Not only to see, let me just make this short parenthesis, not only to update, to get orientation of what we have to do in front of each of the opportunities or problems or challenges that we face, that also, in order to develop this kind of sensibility I told you before in your skin, that you are able to understand what's going on in a conversation, in a conflict, in an opportunity, developing a project. What are the values that are behind of the conversation? So to develop this kind of sensitivity through the exam, the everyday exam, or any other technique, meditation, as Pep told us, is crucial. If you don't develop this sensitivity, this feeling of understanding what's involved in this situation, it's very difficult to keep managing correctly. I insist, not only to get the right orientation to be aligned with the purpose, with the final purpose, but also to have this, to develop this sensitivity. And the second is not only orient, but to move for the organization, your own organization, your own department, your own team, but also the overall institution to this orientation. It's not just to orient, but to orient and to help people to move in this orientation. And here, motivation is crucial, and all this way to help people is directly related with something that is a must to understand and to go deeper, is our way to proceed. How we manage is related with this very traditional expression in the Ignatian tradition, is our way to proceed. Well, having said this, the floor is yours, and we have still some minutes to talk a little bit.
Maybe someone who has not spoken up to now, so we can also hear different voices. Lydia, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Carlos. It was really interesting.
Lydia, say the
Yes,
institution.
yes, Lydia Fioravanti. I work as the international officer at Newman Institute in Uppsala, Sweden. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. And I was thinking now about also before, one of my thoughts about team building is also creating time for reflecting together about identity, mission, where we want to go with our activities and so on. I think it's very valuable and very important and very difficult to do it in the right way, to do it in a way that is fruitful for the organization. And in this sense, like this idea of discernment in common was interesting to develop a way and using the Jesuit experience over the centuries of this common discernment that is not only something that belongs to the single person, but also being able to discern together and to respect each other's competencies and tasks, but at the same way being curious about each other and about what one person can understand of a task that is not their own, the proper own. So yeah, some reflection like at first.
I couldn't agree more. In fact, we are part, in a way or in another, or are linked with the Catholic Church. And now, as you know, Pope Francis is doing an enormous effort to make our church more synodal, and the tool that we have to be more synodal is not just a tool; it's more than a tool, but is discernment in common. And if we don't apply it in our institutions, I think we are not in align with what we should do. No, this is my feeling. So, but any of you could think in another way, evidently. Give my regards to Philip Geister.
Yeah, sure. And also many greetings from Christine and Thomas. They could not attend this time.
Okay. Give my regards to.
Carlos, maybe one question connecting with the previous part. If the activity of a manager is so fragmented, dispersed, hasty, how can you integrate? It's doable because we've seen people doing it, but how can you integrate their discernment in common and personal discernment, which is an activity that requires a certain coordination, time to talk, going deeper into the conversation?
Well, I'm not going to discover any new things. Daily prayer is very important, to pray every day, early in the morning or at the end. To make the Ignatian exam is also very helpful. For me, also very important, the silence, to meditate, to remember that there is another world that is nothing to do with do-des, that do-des is also a field of service, and you have to manage very well do-des field, domain, but it's not the end of the world, it's just a small part of the world. No? So praying, meditating, having the exam, and also creating institutional space, institutional room for some discernment in common that requires preparation. Is not something that can be improvised. No.
Okay. Anyone ready to say, to maybe give a feedback to Carlos or some thoughts or some comments on the whole of the of the presentation?
Summarizing, what I wanted to do is to underline the differences of being manager than being an academic, and in terms of the kind of work we are going to develop and the content of this function. No? And if it was useful for you, it's more than enough. At least to take a couple of ideas that could be useful for you is more than enough. Willie,
Go ahead.
So thank you. It was quite inspiring for me what you've said. One little remark. I see one similarity between at least teaching and being a manager, which is to me enabling, to enable as much to as many people as possible. Maybe I'm sometimes too little a leader also in guiding people when doing their academic work, but that's for me the aim of doing both things to enable other people to reach their aims.
Okay, maybe let's finish here. So first of all, we need to thank Carlos for his time and his dedication to us. So let's clap through the line, through the online. Carlos, thank you very much for your insights. As I told you, I already mentioned Henry Mintzberg and you there in Vienna, so we were prepared. The terrain was prepared.
perfect.
Yeah, and I think I get that idea that Carlos mentioned twice, the idea of managing as serving. Probably many times we forget that. We tend to think of more of brighter activities or more recognized things, but ultimately without managing, there is no good service, there are no institutions, and probably it's the first way to serve the mission for each one of us. So let's
thank you very much to you all for keeping the attention. That is the most scarce resource that we have.
I just wanted to add that one of the specific problems that it can appear in managing in a Jesuit institution is the relationship between the Jesuits and the non-Jesuits inside the organization, particularly if the Jesuits are not at the top but below. And this I have heard from Carlos some good formulations about this tension, but maybe we can leave it for another day, because this is certainly an issue open to debate.
Just to say that working with people like Pep Maria is not a challenge. It's very easy.
He was the boss.
Sometimes.
Majority of time, the boss. Sometimes lateral, but maybe my director.
Okay. Well.
Okay, so let's leave it here. We will meet again next Monday, November 18th at 2 o'clock again. Carlos, in case you want, you're invited, although probably you would prefer to have lunch at that moment. But you're most invited.
I have a lunch, unfortunately, a formal lunch. But if it's cancelled, I will attend for sure.
Okay. So you all know Carlos now. At some point, you need something, or your institution wants to have someone, just who is him and what is he. Okay. Okay. So thank you very much, and see you then next Monday.
Perfect. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
See you next Monday. Bye bye.